Hey, welcome back. Today we have a Mitsubishi Eclipse. The complaint is a no start, a weird one. They say it will start and run for a second and then turn off. They towed it, flat towed it with a tow strap this morning. It's been parked out in my front driveway while I finished up a car earlier this morning. So I haven't even turned the key. I have the key on me. Let's go and see what's going on with the car. All right, so let's head outside. I'm gonna grab my jumper box because this is not my first rodeo. Automatic, no dome light. Nothing on the dash. Just as I expected, battery is dead. Very dead. Well, that's interesting. Okay, that's tight. That appears to be tight. I'm gonna put my ground here. Okay, 5 volts. All right, let's see what happens when we get a little bit of voltage on there. Our hazard lights are on. So I don't know if you see me well in here. I'm hearing something funny with the way the engine's cranking over. It sounds like one or more pistons don't have compression. The customer, when he dropped it off, informed me that his son, who drives this car, happened to be driving it and all of a sudden realized the oil light had been on and he'd been driving it for a long time. So we might be looking at a motor here, not sure. Let me try to crank this over one more time. It almost sounds like I'm hearing compression on an intake stroke. Maybe we jump timing, try it again. Now open the throttle all the way and see what happens. Okay. I really need to put this inside my shop to do some work, but I want to get some preliminary findings before I start digging in. I want to see what the check engine light is on for, see if there's any codes for misfire of some sort, and then we'll see what we do next once I get that information. So we'll be back and we'll follow along as I move along this process. 2 diagnostic codes in the computer, in the engine computer. Let's see what it says in the transmission. Okay, so now let's look at the report. A U1073 and a 3-way cat, and then the transmission a U1073. Now any code that starts with a U is a network or communication failure code. So the network is not communicating. So I want to clear it and see if it comes right back. This is the first step in my diagnostics. So we're just going to clear all the codes and see if any of these come right back. Okay. So these codes have completely cleared. Now, I don't know the specifics of that U code. I just know that it's a communication error code. It is possible that since that code was in the memory, the various computers have stopped communicating. So that could be the reason why we're not running. I don't know for sure. I'm just going on a standard procedure of what I do when I do a no start or a no run, where the engine will start and run for a few seconds. So let's see if it'll start now. So still doesn't work. We are putting out a lot of smoke. So I want to do another scan to see if anything has popped up since we've tried to start the car. Okay, so there are no more codes in the computer. So we now have to think of why is this doing what it's doing. Some cars have a self-preservation mode where if it doesn't sense oil pressure, it starts the car up, and if it doesn't get oil pressure or the oil pressure sensor doesn't put out a signal within a few seconds, it'll shut the engine off. We could be dealing with that. Most of this generation of age of cars, the computer system does not have its hands or its fingers on the fuel system. So are we getting a fuel pump relay that is turning on and then shutting off? Or are we getting if we're losing crank signal, the engine may not be running long enough for the computer to understand that we're losing crank signal, and because we're not getting a crank sensor signal, we're not getting fuel pump. Fuel pump will run when it sees RPM, so the computer will ignite or turn on the fuel pump for a couple of seconds to prime the system up, put some pressure into the fuel system. That allows the engine to start. But if it doesn't see the crank signal or an RPM signal, it will not keep that fuel pump running or turn the fuel pump back on. So we could be just losing the prime and our pump is not being turned on by the computer. But because the computer doesn't have any sensors on the fuel system, there will be no code for that. So this is where I want to come into and talk a minute about diagnostics. It is a misconception that this will just tell me what's wrong. Well, we have a problem with the car and this is not telling me anything. So where you're paying diagnostic charges for, excuse me, you're paying for my experience, you're paying for the tools that I use, you're paying me for my time. Diagnostics is not just plugging this in and this tells me what's wrong. You take this car to AutoZone, O'Reilly's, or any auto parts store, and they'll pull up no codes, but your car is having a problem. Did you do diagnostic even though you scanned it? No, you didn't. So this is where diagnostic time comes in. And yes, I have to charge for it because I'm taking my time onto the vehicle. So that's where we're at. I need to do a little bit of research and I will be back on the camera. Let me know when I get close to the end.
Yeah, you're good.
Lock it down. Hey, and welcome back. As you saw in the time lapse, we had to winch the car back into the shop. I got it up on the lift so it's not so low for me. What I'm going to try to do here today with you guys is to try to talk my mind thought or my mind process out loud. So you might hear me say things, I'm just talking out loud so that you can understand where my head is going while I try to diagnose this. So we had an engine that would start and run for a second or two and then shut off. So right off the bat, that tells me spark plugs are okay. Tells me fuel injectors are okay. Tells me the fuel pump is okay. We also scanned it and there were no codes popping up right away. So there's no hard electrical item that is at fault here. Before it started, while cranking, I was hearing something not right with the cranking cadence, the normal sound of cranking. But I think that might not be part of my thought process, part of what I'm trying to get through. because it ran. So we know mechanically the engine's okay. So where does that lead us to go from here? So I want to pull up my scan tool and I want to look at sensor and engine management data, just live data. I just want to peruse the list, see if there's something that's going to pop out at me, because the computer's not telling me what's wrong. The car is telling me what's wrong, so I need to investigate that. So let me get my scanner back out and sit in the car for a minute, and I don't know if we'll let you watch all of that or not, because that will make the video really long. So we'll just play it out here, and it'll be up to my editor to figure out how he wants to edit this out. All right, here we go. And for those who are asking, this is an OTC Evolve scanner. I've had it for about 4 years. Being an independent little tiny shop that I am, I don't have the tool trucks that go to my shop anymore. I never did. So I don't have access to Snap-on, Cornwell, Matco, none of those. So I had to go elsewhere, and I have experience with the OTC stuff, and this seems to be budget-wise the best option for me. Okay, so let's go select the vehicle. I forget what year this was. Hang on, 2007. So it might be able to auto ID. Auto ID came available around 2005 for domestics, and shortly after that it was available for the imports, and it auto ID'd it. Good. What I'm looking for now is specific data, just to see stuff, what's available. Well, this is interesting. It says our coolant temperature is minus 40 degrees. So let's see if we're getting a crank RPM. So let's start it up and see what happens. Okay, so we did have RPM, but our coolant temp sensor is way off. Okay, fuel pump, let's see if that turns on. Okay, fuel pump turned on. All right, our ignition switch is on. Voltage, we're at 2 volts or 12 volts. Injectors, let's see. Okay, but then we lost data for a second there, and we're losing data again. Oh, wonder if I knocked it loose. Alrighty, so what's our next step? We know our injectors are being turned on. Our fuel pump is turned on, but it dies out on its own. Are we losing spark? Our voltage is slowly dropping, and I have it on the charger. So let me go see what's going on there. All right. So what I'm looking for here is the starter relay, which I suspect is this guy here. No, that's for a fan. So I'm looking for my starter relay because I want to see if I can operate the starter with the key on and be out here to watch the spark visually. All right, more relays. We have, I don't know if you can see in here, we have engine, a key, an engine, automatic transmission, an engine, and a snowflake. I think I better look it up before I start pulling relays. I don't know what that is. All right, I'll be back. I got to do a little bit of look up some stuff, and we'll get right back to this. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to try to find a way to hook up a remote start button to the starter so that I can be out here and trying to start the engine, so I can kind of see in here, because doing it from in there, if anything happens, I won't see it in the car. So whenever you guys do this, so this goes in place or in between the key and the starter, and then this becomes the start button. So if you ever do one of these, hook it up to the starter first, so that if by whatever chance you've already hooked this up to battery and your button has failed, the moment it hits the starter, it may start cranking the motor over and your hands are in the way. So always hook this up to starter first and then your battery last. So what I've just done is unplugged a connector to the start signal of the starter motor assembly. So what I'm doing now is going to hook up this wire to where that connector was on. And I'm doing it blind because I can't see with my hands in the way. Okay, got it on there. Okay. All right, so now it's going to hook up to the starter. Okay, so then we take this side and hook it up to battery positive. Like so. Okay, so now with the key off, we know the car won't start. So what I'm doing first is I want to hear the mechanical cranking of the motor. Let me verify that the key is off. Okay, so now the engine will not start. We know that for a fact. I just want to listen to how it cranks. Okay. Cranking sounded normal, maybe a little bit labored, but we're dealing with a faulty dead battery, which we just ran it down. Turn that back on. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the key on and I want to try to hear it start and run. Okay, now let's try this again. All right, so it started for a minute. I wonder if we're dealing with electrical power, because it seems to be running better each time it starts up. Let's try it again. Okay. All right, let's try this again. And I'm not seeing any smoke in the shop, so my snorkel's doing good. All right. Okay, well that's happening. Next thing I want to do is look at the spark. Is it dying because spark is being taken away? So how do we do that? Well, I think we will use this. This is a spark tester, or not really a tester per se, but more of an indicator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out one of these coils. Take number 3 here. Okay. We're going to leave it connected if we can. Get that out of there. All right. And then we're going to shove this guy down there onto the spark plug. Shove this guy into there. And this will go into here. All right. So now we should be able to see this light up when it sparks. It will light whenever a spark goes through it. Nope. All right, here we go again. All right, so we're not losing spark at all. So that tells me that we're not losing spark. So there we go. We know it's not a spark issue. So, are we dealing with fuel then? Well, how do we determine if we have a fuel issue? Well, if we can supply fuel to the air superseding the fuel system, then we know if the engine runs with our fuel, then we know it's a fuel system issue. And so why do I say that we're dealing with a fuel system issue? If we watched, while watching the spark tester, we noticed that it was still lighting up as the engine was already dying. For the last microsecond, it was still flashing while the engine was dying. So that tells me that we're running out of fuel and not spark. Here we are. Okay. So I would like to check fuel pressure, but I don't know how easy that is to do on this specific engine. Here's our fuel line in here, but we have a big, see if there's a way that we can supply fuel. Maybe if I spray into there, I don't know if that hole is big enough. If I spray fuel into there, we might be able to keep this running, but I don't know if that hole is big enough. There's this hole here. So we have this hole here that we can spray. Problem with doing it here is the fuel's got to go around the throttle plate, which is slightly open. I mean, very minimal open. Where if we can come into here, we're into the intake and the vacuum is sucking the fuel out. The other problem with here is some of that fuel that I'm spraying is going to go down this way, downhill. So I'm not a fan of this port yet, but this port might be too small for me to get into. I'll have to see. Let me get a fresh can. So let's recap here. What have we answered? Well, we answered that the mechanical part of the engine seems to be okay. We've answered that it is getting spark. We've answered that the fuel pump relay is being turned on because we can see that on the scan tool. We might be losing fuel pump. We know that, or we suspect that we are having a fuel issue problem. So let's see if I can get this in that hole. Oh, there we go. Okay. Keep in mind, if you are to attempt something like this, I don't recommend it unless you are trained. There may be a backfire. And if there's a backfire, you have a can of fuel in your hand that can explode. It's part of the job. I don't recommend doing this at home. So we're going to crank it over while we're spraying. So we got it to run a long time or longer time spraying fuel into the intake manifold. So that confirms that we are dealing with a fuel issue because it ran on my fuel. So what's our next step? Let me go into my scan tool and see if I can command, you know what? No, scratch that. Let me find the fuel pump relay and see if I can operate it with my power probe and take the computer control off of the pump. So I gotta look it up on a diagram and then look up where the relay is. So I'll be back. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I've looked up how this operates. You have fuel pump relay number 1 and fuel pump relay number 2. It's very weird that they did it this way, but once you turn the key to on, fuel pump relay is energized. And that sends power to fuel pump relay number 2. And then once that happens, then relay number 2 sends a signal out to the pump. So all I got to do is get relay pump number 2 out, or fuel pump relay number 2 out of the fuse box, and then I'll be able to operate the pump with my power probe. Okay. Okay. Everybody quiet. Okay, I can hear the pump. I can hear it, so I can operate the pump. So okay, so now need to start the engine while operating the pump from here. So that means I need to disconnect my remote button. That way I can turn the key on from here with one hand and operate my power probe with the other hand. This is why diagnostics cost money, okay? Research and you have to battle the engineering of the car. Some engineer thought it was a great idea to put these fuel pump relays inside the dashboard, where most people put it outside in the engine compartment. So again, that's why diagnostic time costs money. So let me disable my remote start button and I will meet you guys back here in a few minutes. Okay, so I've operated the fuel pump electrically from the relay and nothing has changed. So I would almost bet money that our fuel pump is bad here. I need to find out where the fuel pump is to see if I can get to it, to see if I can power it up and see fuel come out. Okay, so we realize that we never did an actual true closing on that video that you just watched. So I'm going to recap a little bit. What we found out is the car has spark. It tries to spark as the engine starts dying. We also made sure the engine can run with fuel that I supplied, so we know that we're dealing with a fuel problem. I could hear the fuel pump working, and then I pulled the fuel pump relay and powered the fuel pump with my power probe, and that forces the pump to work at all times, even when the engine is starting to die, and the engine still died while the fuel pump was working. So at that point, we used up the 1 hour of labor that my customer agreed on, and I had to give them the report. And what was decided is they're going to take the car back and kind of sit on it and see what they want to do with this going forward. Do they want to just try a new fuel pump? Do we want to try to find out why the fuel pump is not pumping fuel? It's a half an hour to get down to the fuel pump and then remove the fuel pump. It's a big ordeal because it's a two-door car. You got to pull the back seat out, which isn't hard, or which isn't easy, since you don't have extra rear doors to do that with. So they decided that they're going to sit on the job for the time being and kind of think about it, probably till next year. So we stopped at that point. So that's what's going on with the car, and that's what was the deciding factor. And I apologize, there's no real closing or solve on this specific job. It's part of the deal, part of being a mechanic working at a shop is you have to do what the customer says. So we got a pretty good result out of what I did. We know that it's a fuel pump or fuel delivery issue. Beyond that, we don't know. I'm just my own experience. I'm going to say it needs a new fuel pump, and that's it. That's all I can tell you. That they decided to take the car out, and we're done with it. So until the next card comes along, we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out to the very end. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.